All right. So in the past week, we have been talking about the Great Depression, basically what it was, what did the government do in order to solve the Great Depression, and how was it solved, and what did it eventually lead to. This week, we are talking about World War II. So just briefly going over the Great Depression. Well, it began in 1929, and it started because people started spending less money on consumer goods. So if people are spending less money buying less things, and that means that there is, companies are going to make less money. So these companies, their revenue or their income is going drastically down because people aren't buying enough. People who are investors, for example, the people that buy stocks. Well, what they do is that they keep on buying more stocks, and they want the companies to raise the prices of the goods. For example, let's say a pair of sneakers cost $10 and then they want to raise them to $20. Well, it's twice as much. They want to earn back what they had lost, but at the same time, people aren't going to be able to afford it. So the company is going to keep losing even more money. So what happens is the following. October 24, 1929 is a day known as Black Tuesday. Now, what the investors do, they see that they're losing money, that the companies are losing money, and what they do is that they cash in the stocks. So they go to the banks and say, all right, so I want to sell my stocks and I want to whatever it's worth. So let's say that my stocks are worth, I don't know, $1,000. So I want my $1,000. So everybody did that at once, and it's going to cause a crash in the stock market. Now, people are going to lose confidence in banks, and they want the money. Factories began to close, so people didn't have an income. People had no money, no jobs, so caused a lot of them to starve and basically to be homeless. So people not having, a job caused them to go to the banks, ask for loans, or to get their savings out of the bank. Now, the bank works with people's savings. So right now, I'm going to the bank and I'm going to deposit $100. There you go. There's my $100. What the bank does is they're not going to keep it on a safe with your name right there and say, all right, these are their $100 and there they are. No. Next person comes in behind you and they need a loan for $100. So what they're going to do is they're going to take your $100 and like, okay, here you go. Here your $100, sir. That's a loan, and you're going to pay a 2.5% interest, which is very low, but over time. Now, the bank is going to make its money from that interest that it's going to charge the person. Okay? So if people need loans, right, and, bank gives them the money, but the people aren't going to be able to pay back, the bank is not going to have any money to give back to the people. So those $100 that were yours, that the bank just lent to somebody else, that person's not able to pay that money. So what happens is that the bank can't get your money back. So next day you go and say, hey, I want my $100. And the bank's like, I don't have it. So what's going to happen? Well, a lot of people are going to mistrust the banks. And if the banks aren't going to be able to loan money to people, they're going to try to collect their money as however they can. So they're going to take your house, your car, whatever you own that's worth something, the bank is going to seize in order to get their money back. But in order for the bank to get the money back, they have to sell those items. If people aren't buying them and they're stuck, they can't get the money. So, this has caused chaos all around. It even affected in Europe, Australia, and other places around the world. It wasn't just in the United States. Okay, now during this time, The president was Herbert Hoover, and he believed that the government shouldn't intervene. He's like, this is going to solve itself. We don't need to worry about it because, you know, everything's going to lay out. Now, a few years went by and, he wasn't doing anything. Towards the end of his term, he did try to bring in new programs, but it wasn't enough. It was too late for him. So later on, Franklin D. Roosevelt gets elected as president. Now, Franklin had come from a very wealthy family. He had money, so he didn't, it really didn't affect him in a way. But in his first term, he did try to establish what's known as the New Deal. The New Deal is basically a set of programs made by the government to help people. Programs like the Social Security Act, which benefited unemployed, handicapped people, and other programs, that the government issued. They started doing government, like paving roads and things like that, and giving those jobs to young men. So the government started hiring people and paying them to construct things for the government. Now, that is how eventually, things were made a little bit better with government intervention. Now, sometimes there was opposition from opponents because they believed that the government was playing too much of a big role. The government was being big in controlling people's lives. So they didn't, they were against it. And sometimes they trumped down some of FDR's ideas. But in the end, those policies that the government, put into place are still around right now. FDR also worked with workers' unions to kind of, work for workers' rights and things like that. So he did reform and change how things were running and turned the country around anyway. Now, World War II is going to be right around the corner. It's going to start, and a lot of equipment is going to be required for war. For example, food to send to the soldiers, weapons, and any type of military equipment that needs to be constructed that's going to create a lot of jobs for the people. So these things are going to, World War II is going to officially get the economy moving and get basically the United States and the world out of depression, in some way. So that's basically it as a summary of the Great Depression. And then we will be talking about World War II promptly. Until next time, remember tutorials are Thursdays and Fridays. Thursdays at 11 and Fridays at 1 p.m. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out through email, Google Classroom, or through Remind. I'm always available. I always answer whenever I get the chance to. So please communicate with me if you have any questions.